Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett and I'm the founder and owner of TechViews Nope, and today I am getting into the 5th class of hacking, and in this class we're going to be talking about how to bounce your IP address across the globe. And as far as things goes, if you do know what I'm talking about, this is going to be chain proxies, and we're just going to get into the why you want to set them up, not how to set them up, and I'll get into that in a second. But we're really going to get into and focus into some of the important things, like how to avoid the pitfalls, because even if you're using proxies, you can get found, and how to actually use proxies to your advantage in different countries, and how to avoid pitfalls with Flash and Java and whatnot. But how to use international situations to your advantage, not how to create them, but how to use them to your advantage. How to pin the stuff on someone else by using X44. And there was one other thing, but we'll get into that in a second. Now, for those of you who are completely lost and don't know what a proxy is and whatnot, it's fine. It's pretty simple to explain, but basically, for a example case on what we're going to talk about on balancing IP addresses, let's talk about the movies. We all know, and this is a really important thing to note, we all know that in the movies, things are much more in a timely manner, so it's a lot more quicker. Things are a lot more cooler as far as looks and whatnot. And things sometimes are more or less riskier than they are in real life. Now, in this case, depending on how things are, you're doing more or less riskier. And I'll get into this in a second, and it's very important to note the risk. So in the movies, hacking movies, you got a person A being a group or single person of hacker, and person B being authoritative figure, being the government, company, or whoever the hacker's targeting. The person B will be tracing down the person A once they start a hack, and in the movies, 9 times out of 10, you get this glorified map of the entire globe, and maybe even a city, and somehow it shows the level 4 and yada yada yada. But basically, what you'll see is the dot go from one country to the next country, to another part of the same country, to a completely other side of the world, in a city level, maybe one floor to another building, to wherever. And that's bouncing your IP address, basically bouncing where you are, and that way they don't ever really know where you're at. And this is using chain proxies. It's not really bouncing. It's basically going through several proxies, and once they figure out where one proxy is, the closest one to them as far as the last one that you use, they go and look for the next one and the next one and the next one. And in the movies, and this is not like real life, keep in mind, once they get into the last one, that's when you get into real risk and they figure out where you're at. So in fact, when in real life, what happens is if they get into the last one and you really didn't do the right thing, they will figure out where you're at and you need to move. So and that's not a joke. So that's pretty important. Now in real life, what happens? Just a quick side note. The person tracking the stuff down is not that fast. It takes days, sometimes weeks, even most of the time it takes years. And what it is each proxy that you go through, the person tracking you down, if they are being legal about it, of course they can be illegal about it and just hack in and look at event logs. But if they're being legal about it, then they need a permission. If they don't get that, and if they're a company, they have to go to the government. The government has to ask for permission. If they already are the government, then they have to get a warrant, and you know how long that takes. And then they have to go to the next person, and eventually it's going to get to a point where, yeah, they're going to not stop but eventually it's going to get to a point where it's going to take a long time. And sometimes they even try to make a decision, is this worth tracking down? So that's a pretty important thing to note. It's nothing like the movies in that aspect. In fact, both aspects. Having a cool map and all that stuff. Now, one thing I want to mention before we jump on into this class is this is going to be a PowerPoint based class, and the reason for this is it's a lot easier on me. Mostly because there's nothing for me to show on my computer. It's just kind of, hey, here's my IP address. Now here's my IP address. I mean, it's not like I'm going to track myself down. It's also not like I'm going to show something illegal, showing the event logs between places. I don't really have any servers to test this out on, and servers cost a lot of money. So as far as the other thing, let's get into the quick disclaimer before we jump into this. Because you can use this for illegal activity, this video is for educational purposes. In fact, this video is actually for pen testers to help pen testers and regular site owners and whatnot understand what they could be up against. That way they don't, one, claim the wrong person. Very important, because you can actually use an export for stuff and actually make it where it looks like you're someone else, and as a hacker. And that way, instead of you capturing a hacker, you're capturing some Joe Blow that doesn't even know how to spell Apple on a computer. So that's pretty important, because some people do actually get interrogated, if nothing else, for a little while for that. So it disrupts their life, and sometimes it translates into lawsuits. Another thing is how hackers can use this against you. Keep in mind, most hackers are not this advanced, and I'm going to be getting into some higher level things, which is important, because if you're doing a pen test, you want to cover your tracks. So we gotta define a few things before we really jump into this. We gotta define what a proxy is, a proxy chain, and an event log is. Those are the most important ones out of anything. So what a proxy is basically in our case, is a summary, a web server that we can redirect through. So basically, a crappy example, but example nonetheless, is Google. We can use Google as a proxy, and let's say we want to use, I don't know, Yahoo. We want to go to Yahoo, but we don't want them to know where we're at for some reason, but we're okay with Google knowing where we're at for some reason. So what will happen is we will send information out. If we have the proxy set up, we'll send information out. It goes to Google, gets redirected, goes to Yahoo. Yahoo thinks that we're Google through our IP address, if they don't go any deeper. And then any information coming back is Yahoo will go through Google, and it'll be redirected to us. And that's a pretty simple thing, but one thing that some people use this for is, let's say for example they do something stupid on some game server and their IP gets banned, then what they can do is use a proxy to change their IP address, or at least what appears to be their IP address. That way, that game that they're banned from, they're not banned anymore. That's the reason why most games and other things are now using usernames to ban people, not their actual IP addresses. Sometimes they're using IP addresses. Now, as far as that goes, that's very unsecure to use only one proxy, and I'll get into why in a second with the event logs. The chain proxy is just basically doing multiple proxies at once, because before, let's say with that example, you to Google to Yahoo, Google is in California, and that means that it's bouncing my IP address from here. Most people know that I'm in the United States, North Carolina, and California is on the air side of the country. So basically, it's bouncing my IP address on the other side of the country to Yahoo. Well, in this case, what's going to happen, let's say we're doing with 3 proxies, just make it easier on me. And proxy 1, 2, 3. Proxy 1 is in, I don't know, Africa. 2 is in China, and 3 is in South America. So basically, it's going, let's say our target is Yahoo. So let's see if I remember this right. Our information will go through ourselves to proxy 1, and I believe I said Africa, and then it will go from Africa being redirected to our proxy 2, which is in China, and then it will be redirected again to our 3rd proxy, which is in South America. Then it'll be redirected to our target, which is Yahoo. So Yahoo thinks that we're in South America. It starts looking up things and sees that we're really not in South America, and then it'll go to China, see we're not really in China, and go to Africa, we're not really in Africa, and then goes to our location. It's kind of like the movie scenario where you see the dot bounce all over the place, their IP bounce all over the place. It's the exact same thing. They're discovering where you're at by going through the proxy that's connected to them last, or well, first, and then going to the one that you connected to first. So that's pretty important. Now, as far as that goes, one disadvantage to this is your internet speed will be slowed down because you're dependent on those servers on how fast they can move. And also, depending on your end location, is depending on any country restrictions. That's pretty important. I'll get into that in a second with the international events. As far as the event logs, which is probably the most important out of all this, event logs are, well, logs that log events. Basically, for most computers and servers and whatnot, what will happen is when someone accesses a server, it will log their IP address in time, say connected time. Then if it's a redirect, some IP addresses, or some logs, not all logs, will say redirect IP address to IP address timestamp. And what will happen is also with the logs is it will show what files were accessed, any errors, anything like that. But for the most part, what we're dealing with proxies is connection and the redirection, which is very important. Now, with that in mind, what happens is, let's say for example you attacked Yahoo, going through that last scenario. What will happen is they will take the log and they will ask the company, or get the government involved, and the government will ask the company in South America for their logs for X time. The logs will come out one way or another, by force or by choice, and they'll basically say proxy 2, which is in China. Same thing will happen there, and the logs will show proxy 1 in Africa. And let's just say for international basis, this country doesn't like America too much. They can actually legally deny, since it's a different country, legally deny that, and you're scot-free. You don't really have to do nothing. You might still want to go into one to delete your information as far as the logs, but beyond that, you're scot-free. Now, we need to pick our proxies, and we need to look at the pitfalls. But before we pick our proxies, we need to figure out who is our target and what countries they influence. So, I'm just going to put a hypothetical situation out, worst case scenario type of deal. Google. or let's say our target is Google, and specifically a server in Germany. So Google is an American company. Its headquarters in America. Its servers all over the place, and one of its servers is in Germany. Okay, so that means that we got two countries to fight against, Germany and America, in one company that's international that has a huge force against it, a huge force within it, security force. So basically, we're at the worst case scenario level. How do we go against this? First things first is you need to find your proxies. You need to find your get out of jail free card proxy, which is very important to start that early as possible. And basically what get out of jail free card country is, or get out of jail free card proxy is a proxy within a country that will not willingly ever give its information out to the countries and company that you're going after. And that's pretty important because what happens is, let's say that our get out of jail free card country is, or proxy is within North Korea, because I know that Germany and pretty much Europe and United States doesn't get along with North Korea, and North Korea doesn't get along with pretty much anyone besides a handful, and mostly China. So basically what's going to happen is eventually the trace is going to go down to North Korea, and they're going to say, hey, can we look at your stuff, and to figure out who hacked into our stuff. Or they're going to blame them, but they're going to probably just going to be nice and say, hey, can we look at our stuff? And what's going to happen is they're going to say no to both countries. And that's your get out of jail free card, because if you didn't make anyone mad enough, that's the end of the road, and that's that. But if you made someone mad enough, then what's going to happen is the countries, whatever countries, being America and Germany in this case, they're going to send spies to look at the event logs, and it doesn't have to be feet on the ground for this case. It can be just hackers hacking into the proxy remotely, and that way they can look at the event logs remotely. Because if you can get to the proxy remotely, they can get to the proxy remotely. I mean, it's not like a physical piece of paper that's the only person that can see it. It's the person that's holding it. So you got to keep that one in mind, is if you're able to control it remotely, they're able to control it remotely. So and that's probably not going to happen unless, again, if you made someone that mad, which is impressive, to say less. But again, why I said that this is educational. Now, as far as picking your proxies, now that you pick your get out of jail free card proxy, you need to pick the rest of your proxies based on 4 things. First off, it needs to be all in different locations, different countries around the world. If you're in Europe, count Europe as one country pretty much. Yes, you can put proxies, Italy, France, UK, so on. But for the most part, count Europe as one country, because the criminal system, the police system that they have there. But as far as everything else, what you need to do is you need to make sure that your proxies are not within the same country repeatedly. And what I mean by this is, let's say proxy 3, 4, 5, you don't want them all in, Italy. And the reason for this is you don't want to make it easier for whomever's tracking you, because basically what's going to happen is if your proxy is in a different country and you just put 2 or 3 or whatever following proxies in the same country following each other, then they can use the same representative to help fight against, to get the event logs. And that's pretty important, because if you end up having it where proxy 3 is in Italy, proxy 4 is in, I don't know, Russia, proxy 5 is in, I don't know, South Korea, and proxy 6 is in Italy, chances are is when they get from 3 to 6, they got to use a different representative or a different person, and that increases the time and everything. And it's just a pain for them. And that's, you want to make it as hard as possible for them to track you down. And that just adds days to doing whatever you need to do. Because what happens on some jobs is you have to keep going back on consecutive days. Maybe they added something, maybe they didn't. Maybe you're, and this is very important because maybe they're tracking you while you're tracking them. Maybe you're tracking something in their system, a file being updated, they can't figure out what you're tracking. They're going to leave it open because they got to, for whatever reasons. Maybe they're a government, maybe because they're a big business, but they can't shut it off, which happens if you're dealing with a game. But if you're dealing with a major company or a government server, they're pretty much not going to shut it off that easy. They might switch everything, but they're not going to shut it off that easy. So what's going to happen is you need to find, you know, a ability to extend that time as much as possible, depending on the job, obviously. So the after picking the countries, what you need to do is security, safety, security, stability, and speed. Sorry about that. Let's get into speed. The speed is pretty important because a lot of people don't factor this in when dealing with proxies, and this is why a lot of people don't deal with proxies unless they're hacking and the actual doing something. What happens is your connection's only as good as what you're redirecting as your slowest. So if you're in slow, then you know that it's going to be slow because of that. But let's say that your get out of jail free card is very slow, which chances it is. Then what happens is you need to have all your other proxies to or above, really above that level than your get out of jail free card. So basically you need to have it faster because you can't, I mean, depending on what country you're going after, might depend on who you can pick it for your get out of jail free card. But for the most part, you're probably not going to have a choice. So you're probably not going to have too much of a choice on which proxy you're going to get and how safe, like how secure something is, how stable it is, and how fast it is in your get out of jail free card country. So you got to go and pick something above that for every other proxy, which is very, very important. And now let's get into the so to clarify, you need to have a fast proxy because your speed does decrease over the amount of proxies you're going through, plus the proxies themselves can slow down. So now let's get into the stability, which is a big thing that a lot of people overlook. Proxies, the way I view it for stability is like Christmas lights, the old ones, or if you want to call it holiday lights, fine, whatever. But I don't call it Christmas lights. Basically, it's like the old ones where if one light blows out, the entire row is dead. So what you need to do is you need to find a stable proxy, because basically what happens is, let's say you got 50 proxies. It could be 1, it could be 50, it could be any of them. It could be even your get out of jail free card. If any of the proxies goes down or their IP address changes, then your connection is disconnected. Depending on what exactly you're doing is depending on if whomever your target is will figure out that they're being hacked. Very, very, very important, because if they figure out they're being hacked, they can react in a few ways. They can ignore it. Some do. And most don't. They can call authorities, and they can shut down the actual connection altogether, and you gotta do your research again. So that means that you need to have stable proxies. Now keep in mind, if your job lasts more than one day, really lasts more than 3 hours to 6 hours, you need to have a rotational proxy list. You need to figure out the times that the proxies are being changed, the IP addresses for the proxies, and you need to find the times that they tend to go down. And if you find those two things out, you can use a rotational list, and that way your connection should be pretty good. Very, very, very important, because again, your job as a hacker, black or white hat, is to make sure that your target is never knowing that you're actually were there until you want them to be there. Basically, you're a ninja, as all speak. The only time you ever see a ninja is when they want you to see him. That's what you need to be if you're a hacker. So that's very, very important. In other words, you're dead. Like literally, you can probably die if you take out the wrong person, or you can go and get your house raided or go to jail for being stupid. So, and if you're a white hat, then that means that you lost your contract, and that means no money for all your work. So, after that, I don't think there's really anything else you gotta look into. Security, again, knowing how often they're checking their stuff, knowing how secure stuff is. Stability, I got into that. Speed, I got into that. And country thing, I got into that. So those are the primary things you need to look at when you're picking up proxies. And it's very important to have your own list. Unless you're working for a group, then you need to check that list. Even if they give it to you and say, trust it, you need to check it. It's very important that you trust that list with your life, because that is your life. Again, you take out the wrong person, accident or purpose, you can end your own life, or you can go to jail, and that's pretty much ending your own life. So you need to trust that list with your life. Let's get into some pitfalls that some people run into when they are about to start the job in Aether. So now that you picked your IP or your proxies and whatnot, what you need to do is disable Flash and Java and some other stuff. But those are the main ones, Flash and Java. And what that happens is Flash, you can actually use that to figure out someone's actual IP address, and that's pretty important, because if you figure out someone's actual IP address, then you're, or at least as the person tracing it, you're great. If you're a hacker, well, you kind of suck. So yeah, disable that. I'm not going to get into why. I mean, it should be point blank by now. But as far as the other thing is, and a lot of people don't know about this, is X44 and also DNS. Let's get into DNS real quick. Just change the DNS address, and that way you don't have to worry about that. Do a mock going out, some other DNS address, whatever. But the X44 address, or X44, XFF. Is what most people call it. And basically what this is, it shows the actual IP address, even with the proxies. Even like basically, if someone sets up the server right and you're using their server as a proxy, then what can happen is it'll show the redirect on their server, plus it'll show the actual the actual IP address towards your client, to your computer or whatever. And that's pretty important, because if it shows the actual IP address, then you're kind of screwed, and they're going to find you. So how do you get around this? Well, you could disable it, but it's not advisable. It's advisable to actually redirect it. Redirect the X44 or XFF, and find someone or some group that you don't like, a country, a group of some type, a company, I don't care. But find something that can take the blame, be your scapegoat. Because what can happen is you take the XFF and you redirect it to, say, EA. And now all of a sudden it looks like EA actually hacked into whatever, and when in reality it was you. And this is an important thing, because if you're a pen tester, a system administrator or some type, and you're looking at the XFF, and you're trying to really find out who hacked into your stuff, through that, this is not a good way to find someone, because someone with actual skills and a little bit of experience will be able to actually redirect that stuff, make it look like someone else actually hacked into your system, and then when you tell the cops to go after someone, the cops will arrest them and they will raid them, even if it's a company, and they will be merciless at it. And if you're in some countries, that could be the death of the people. And keep in mind, I deal with international crowd, and some countries have strict laws and strict penalties for those laws. So keep that one in mind, because XFF is not a good way of figuring out who hacked you, and it can be easily manipulated. But most cops and most people don't know about this, about how easy it is, and that's pretty important. Again, make sure DNS is changed, and that way it doesn't link back to you. So now that the job's done, you need to do some cleanup, and this is a big pitfall for a lot of people. A lot of people, what they do is, when they're done, is they pretty much cash in, drink, and whatever. But if you're a white hat, you don't have to worry about it. Black hat, you definitely have to worry about it. What you need to do is hack into proxy 1 to proxy server 1, and go and erase the event logs that says the redirectory, also the connection, the saying that you connected to it that given time to erase it, and make sure that it doesn't have any disconnect logs. That's very important, and most likely it doesn't, but make sure it doesn't. But that's a horrible way of doing things, and personally I advise people to everybody to modify the logs, and modify the logs quite a few times. What I will do is modify the logs. So first, erase where you just entered, and erase where you just looked at the access stuff, so you're invisible right now, to a point. And then, because I mean, you still show up being connected, and you still gotta look at stuff and refresh the logs. But what you need to do is you need to go and modify logs, and depend on the memory that they're using, 12 to 40 times, and usually it burns apart in the memory and makes it where forensically they can't find it, or it makes it nearly impossible, depending on the skill level of the forensics person. And that way, forensically, if they look back at it, and if you deleted it, then they could still figure out your IP address and still come after you. But if you basically burnt the image and whatnot, then, and as time goes on, the number that you have to go through might become higher, or it might become completely impossible to burn the image. But as far as things right now, you just have to do it quite a few times, burn the image, and basically it makes it where they can't go back and do whatever. And that way you can erase it and don't have to worry about them looking at you. Now, there's no 100% on this particularly works. Because unless if you're physically there doing the forensics and whatnot, you're kind of just crossing your fingers and hoping luck. So what some people do is, like for me, if I was hacking into Google, the Germany server, and that was my target again with the hypothetical situation, what I would do is modify it where the where it would say your client and your IP address. What I would do is modify that to say Google's IP address, the servers, and that way it's a full loop. And that or modify it to say someone or something I don't like, or say another part of Google, so it looks like Google's hacking into Google. And that's pretty important, because what's going to happen is it's going to say let's say you modify it to show Google's server in America hacked into Google's server in Germany by using all these proxies and whatnot, which they probably say no, it didn't. They still probably do some investigation, and it will end right there, because Google's server in America, or whatever you choose, is not even going to show anything, because you didn't touch that one at all during this process, at least. So that's pretty important, and that's pretty important to modify it versus then to delete it if possible. Some servers you can't modify it, and some things you can't modify at all, depending on how secure it is, as far as if they actually look at the stuff that often, and if their software is up to date and whatnot. But depending on the server, most likely it's not up to date. Most likely they're not looking at the logs. So anyways, let's do a quick recap on this, and let's end this video. So what did we just talk about? Well, we got into a definition, kind of definition of proxies, proxy chains, and event logs. After that, we got into how to pick your get out of jail free country or proxy, and that way you have at least that option of did not turn off your information, make it a little bit longer, and making it where that's a dead end in some cases. Then I talked about how to pick your other proxies, speed, security, stability in different countries. Then I talked about some pitfalls, Flash, Java, XFF, sorry about that, and some other pitfalls, and that's pretty much it. So if you got any questions or anything like that, then please leave a comment below, and I'll try to help you out as quickly as possible. Also, again, this video is for educational purposes only. This video is to help pen testers and to help other people who's thinking about going in the career field, so they understand what some hackers do and some links some hackers do to not be caught. This is a common thing, and there is some other things you can do to not be caught, but for the most part, this is one of the more proven things that works over a period of time. But again, a lot of people don't do it, mostly because it's a pain, as you may guess, for the length of this video. But as far as things goes, again, if you got any questions, whatnot, you know where to get me. And if you want to add anything to this, then also leave that below in the comment section. I'm pretty sure I left out some stuff because of the length of this. I just got tired of it. But also, if you like this video, if you think it helped you and whatnot, please like, please subscribe, and please share. And please visit techreviewsnup.com and have a great day.